For decades, the United States has enjoyed an enviable position in the global financial system. The US dollar reigns supreme as the world's reserve currency. Countries around the globe eagerly purchased US Treasury bonds, viewing them as safe and reliable investments. This constant influx of foreign capital allowed the US to finance its massive deficits and maintain its economic dominance. However, the tectonic plates of global finance began to shift. Resentment simmered over perceived US economic policies that benefited itself at the expense of others. The year 2025 brought this simmering tension to a boil. On April 16, 2025, the unthinkable happened. Japan, America's closest ally in Asia and the largest foreign holder of US debt, made a move that sent shockwaves through the global financial system. The world held its breath as the news broke. Japan had dumped $1.7 trillion worth of US Treasury bonds in just 48 hours. The financial world reeled. This was not just a market tremor, it was a full-blown earthquake, the likes of which had never been seen before. This single action by Japan would set in motion a chain reaction that would forever alter the global financial landscape. The immediate impact of Japan's move was swift and brutal. The value of the US dollar plummeted as investors around the world, fearing a collapse, rushed to sell their dollar-denominated assets. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, a key indicator of the US stock market's health, plunged a record 4,800 points, wiping out trillions of dollars in market value. The technology-heavy Nasdaq Composite Index tumbled 12%, further reflecting the panic gripping investors. The S&P 500, a broader measure of the US stock market, experienced its worst single-day drop since the 2008 financial crisis, erasing over $5 trillion in market capitalization. The bond market, where investors buy and sell US Treasury bonds, was also thrown into chaos. The yield on the benchmark 10-year Treasury note, a key indicator of investor confidence in the US economy, spiked to 6.2%, a level not seen in over a decade. This surge in yield signaled that investors were demanding a much higher return for lending money to the US government, reflecting their growing concerns about the country's economic stability. The ripple effects of Japan's massive treasury sell-off were felt far beyond Wall Street. As the value of the dollar plummeted and interest rates soared, businesses across America faced a credit crunch. Loans became more expensive, making it difficult for companies to invest, expand, and create jobs. The American middle class, already grappling with stagnant wages and rising costs of living, bore the brunt of the financial fallout. Retirement accounts, heavily invested in the stock market, were decimated. Millions of Americans watched in horror as their hard-earned savings evaporated overnight. Pension funds, responsible for the retirement security of millions more, suffered significant losses, ranging from 15 to 20%. Consumer confidence plummeted, leading to a sharp decline in spending. Businesses, faced with declining sales and mounting economic uncertainty, were forced to lay off workers, further fueling the downward spiral. The once mighty US economy, already weakened by years of growing inequality and reckless financial speculation, teetered on the brink of recession. Japan's decision to dump its US Treasury holdings was not a rash move. It was a calculated and strategic decision, driven by a growing sense of frustration and a desire to reshape the global financial order. For years, Japan had been a steadfast ally of the United States, providing a critical counterbalance to China's growing influence in Asia. However, a series of events had strained the relationship between the two allies. Japan felt increasingly marginalized by US economic policies that it perceived as harmful to its own interests. Japan's $1.7 trillion sell-off was just the first step in a broader strategic pivot away from the United States and towards Asia. Japan strategically reinvested its capital, pouring $300 billion into Chinese and Indian bonds, $200 billion into infrastructure projects across Southeast Asia, and significantly increasing its reserves of Chinese yuan and Indian rupees. This strategic realignment signaled a profound shift in the balance of economic power in Asia and beyond. Japan's move sent a clear message to the world. The era of US economic dominance was coming to an end. Section 5. The Price of Power, Eroding Trust and the Defense Dilemma. Japan's dramatic financial moves were not merely about economics, they were also a reflection of a deeper geopolitical shift. The decision to dump US treasuries sent shockwaves through the global defense establishment, raising serious questions about the future of US military commitments around the world. For decades, the US had leveraged its economic power to maintain its position as the world's dominant military force. Countries relied on the US for security guarantees, and the US dollar's role as the global reserve currency underpinned this system. However, Japan's actions exposed a fundamental flaw in this system. The over-reliance on US military might had created a dangerous dependence, and now the credibility of U.S. defense commitments was being called into question. This erosion of trust was exacerbated by the perception that the U.S., under the Trump administration, had become increasingly unreliable and unpredictable on the world stage. Trump's America First policies, characterized by unilateralism and a disregard for international norms, had alienated many longtime U.S. allies. Section 6. A World in Transition, the Rise of New Financial Powers. Japan's move was a catalyst, accelerating a trend that had been building for years: the gradual decline of the U.S. dollar's dominance and the emergence of a multipolar world order. China, the world's second-largest economy, had been steadily reducing its holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds, diversifying its reserves, and promoting the use of its own currency, the yuan, in international trade. Other countries followed suit, seeking to reduce their dependence on the U.S. dollar and establish alternative financial systems. The Middle East began trading oil in yuan, challenging the petrodollar system that had underpinned U.S. economic hegemony for decades. A new Asian financial network, capitalized with over $1.2 trillion, emerged as a viable alternative to the Western-dominated SWIFT system. The G20, a group of the world's 20 largest economies, proposed a new global reserve basket of currencies, including gold, energy, defense technologies, and a mix of Asian and European bonds. The U.S. dollar's share of global reserves dwindled to 52.7%, a 30-year low. The world was witnessing a fundamental realignment of economic power. The era of unipolarity, with the U.S. at the helm, was fading, replaced by a more fragmented and uncertain landscape. Section 7. The Future of the Dollar, a Currency in Question. The once unthinkable notion that the U.S. dollar could lose its status as the world's reserve currency was now a topic of serious discussion. The dollar's decline was driven by a confluence of factors, including America's mounting debt, its waning economic influence, and the erosion of trust in its leadership. The consequences of a dollar collapse would be profound. The U.S. would lose its ability to finance its massive deficits cheaply, potentially leading to higher interest rates, inflation, and economic instability. American consumers would face higher prices for imported goods, further eroding their purchasing power. Moreover, the loss of the dollar's reserve status would diminish America's influence on the global stage. Countries would be less likely to hold U.S. debt, potentially limiting America's ability to project its military power and shape global events. While the dollar's demise was not imminent, the writing was on the wall. The world was moving towards a more diversified monetary system, one in which the U.S. dollar would no longer reign supreme. Section 8. Lessons from the Abyss. Rethinking Global Dependence. The financial crisis of 2025 served as a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of the global economy and the dangers of excessive dependence on a single nation. Japan's actions exposed the vulnerabilities of a system in which one country, the United States, held disproportionate power. The crisis highlighted the need for greater economic diversification and cooperation. Countries around the world began to prioritize regional trade agreements and strengthen their own financial institutions, reducing their reliance on the U.S. dollar and Western-dominated institutions. The crisis also underscored the importance of responsible economic stewardship. The U.S. for too long had taken its economic dominance for granted, pursuing policies that benefited its elite at the expense of its own citizens and the global community. The financial reckoning of 2025 was a wake-up call, forcing a much-needed reassessment of the global economic order. Section 9. A New World Order. Navigating the Post-Dollar Landscape. The financial earthquake of 2025 irrevocably altered the global landscape. The era of U.S. economic dominance was drawing to a close, replaced by a multipolar world order characterized by shifting alliances, competing currencies, and a diffusion of economic power. This new world order presents both opportunities and challenges. The decline of U.S. hegemony creates space for new voices and alternative models of development to emerge. Developing countries, no longer beholden to the dictates of Washington, have greater leverage to negotiate fairer trade deals and pursue their own economic destinies. However, this new world order also brings with it greater uncertainty and the potential for conflict. The absence of a clear hegemon increases the risk of miscalculation and escalation, as countries navigate a more complex and fluid geopolitical landscape. The world is entering uncharted territory. The financial crisis of 2025 marked the end of an era. The future will be shaped by how countries adapt to this new reality, and whether they can forge a more equitable and sustainable global order. Europe is making a bold move. They're ditching their reliance on U.S. defense. That's right, the continent that once relied on American might is going solo. Why the dramatic shift? Well, let's just say America's report card on the reliable ally front needs some serious work. the EU is pouring billions into their new defense strategy. Readiness 2030. We're talking 800 billion euros. That's enough to make even the most jaded arms dealer blush. And guess who's not invited to the party? The US and the UK. Ouch. European leaders aren't mincing words. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, put it bluntly, we need to prepare for a scenario where the US is no longer a strategic partner. Let that sink in for a moment. This isn't just about tanks and missiles, it's about trust. And clearly, the US is running low on that valuable commodity. Europe is forging new partnerships, turning to Japan and South Korea for defense cooperation. The message is clear. America, you're on thin ice. Your allies are looking for more reliable friends. Canada, America's friendly neighbor to the north, is also rethinking its loyalties. Remember all those heartwarming cross-border friendships? Yeah, about that. Canada is teaming up with Australia on a massive defense project, a cool $6 billion for a fancy new radar system. This isn't just your average military hardware deal, it's a clear signal that Canada is shifting its focus away from the US. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government is sending a message. America, you're not the only game in town anymore. When your closest friends start looking elsewhere for security, it might be time to check the expiration date on your world's best friend mug. This isn't just a diplomatic spat. It has real-world consequences. American defense contractors are losing out on lucrative deals. More importantly, the US is losing its grip on global alliances, the kind that have underpinned its power for decades. Remember those adorable photos of politicians cuddling puppies? It's supposed to make them look approachable, cuddly even. Well, someone forgot to tell the Trump administration that puppy diplomacy doesn't work when you're trying to win over a nation with a 600-year history of, well, not being yours. Enter Usha Vance, Trump's envoy to Greenland, with her own brand of charm offensive. Let's just say it didn't go well. Denmark, which has strong historical ties to Greenland, was not amused. The reaction from Greenlanders themselves? Let's just say they weren't lining up to shake Usha's hand. See, Greenland might be geographically close to the US, but culturally and historically, they're miles apart. This wasn't just a diplomatic faux pas. It was a tone-deaf blunder that highlighted America's clumsy approach to international relations. While America's global standing is taking a hit, things aren't exactly peachy at home either. The economy is sputtering, protests are erupting across the country, and the American dream seems further away than ever for many. Remember those Make America Great Again hats? Well, a lot of Americans are wondering when the great part is supposed to kick in. From Denver to Tucson, people are taking to the streets, demanding economic justice and a fairer system. We're not talking about a few disgruntled citizens here. Over 60,000 people participated in nationwide protests. In Denver alone, 35,000 people showed up. That's a lot of angry voices. These protests are a sign of deep-seated frustration. People are fed up with stagnant wages, rising costs of living, and a system that seems rigged in favor of the wealthy. The American dream is starting to feel like a distant memory. Experts are warning that America's inward-looking policies, particularly its love affair with tariffs, could have dire consequences. Remember that old saying, those who cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it? Yeah, someone might want to slip that onto Trump's nightstand. J.P. Morgan, not exactly known for its radical pronouncements, is predicting that the U.S. economy could fall behind the EU, Japan, and China within a decade or two. That's right, the economic powerhouse of the world could soon be playing second fiddle. Think about that for a second. The U.S., the champion of free trade, is now at risk of becoming a laggard in the global economy. This isn't just about economic statistics, it's about America's standing in the world. Economic strength translates into global influence, and right now, America's influence is waning. Remember those epic family road trips to Disney World or those boozy weekends in Vegas? Well, Canadians are saying no thanks to American vacations. And it's not just because they're tired of Mickey Mouse. A whopping 90% of Canadian tourists are boycotting travel to the US this year. That's millions of people and billions of dollars staying north of the border. This isn't just a casual travel trend, it's a full-blown political statement. Canadians are putting their money where their mouths are, or rather they're keeping their money away from American businesses. The message is clear. We don't agree with your policies and we're not going to support them with our tourist dollars. This boycott might seem like a small thing, but it's a symptom of a much larger problem, America's declining influence. When even your closest neighbors would rather stay home than spend their money in your country, it's time to take a long, hard look in the mirror. America, it seems, is facing a crisis of leadership, both at home and abroad. The world is watching and they're not liking what they see. The consequences of this decline will be felt not just by diplomats and politicians, but by everyday Americans, from factory workers in the Rust Belt to tech entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. The time for introspection, and perhaps a change of course, is now.
The heart of summer, the sun shining down on the sandy shores of Old Orchard Beach, Maine. A picture-perfect scene, right? Not quite. Something is different this year. Something is missing. The laughter of Canadian families, once a familiar sound, has faded. The colorful array of license plates from north of the border, a testament to the strong ties between the two nations, has dwindled. The vibrant energy that Canadian tourists brought to this coastal town, and countless others across the United States, is simply gone. The absence of Canadians is stark, a visual reminder of the deep rift that has opened up between the United States and its neighbor to the north. This isn't just a matter of fewer tourists. It's a full-blown boycott, a powerful statement against U.S. policies that have left Canadians feeling alienated and disrespected. Businesses are hurting, economies are struggling, and the future of the crucial U.S.-Canada relationship hangs in the balance. To understand the silence on the beaches and the emptiness in the shops, we need to look north, to the very heart of the matter. Canadians, once eager visitors to the United States, are staying home, their wallets firmly shut to American businesses. This is not a decision made lightly, but a calculated response to a series of political moves by the Trump administration that have been perceived as hostile and unfair. The seeds of discontent were sown with the imposition of hefty tariffs on Canadian goods, a move that sent shockwaves through the Canadian economy. But it was the rhetoric coming out of the White House, the talk of annexing Canada as the 51st state, that truly stoked the flames of resentment. Canadians, long accustomed to a relationship built on mutual respect and cooperation, felt betrayed. The message was clear. The United States was putting its own interests first, even if it meant trampling on its closest ally. The pain of the Canadian boycott is being felt acutely in places like Old Orchard Beach, Maine, a popular destination for Canadian families for generations. The town's economy, heavily reliant on tourism dollars, is reeling from the sudden drop in visitors. Hotels that once buzzed with activity now sit eerily quiet, their rooms vacant despite the peak season. Restaurants, once overflowing with Canadians eager to sample American fare, are struggling to fill tables, their staff facing reduced hours or even layoffs. The economic impact is trickling down, impacting every corner of this small community. Shop owners, their shelves stocked with souvenirs that now gather dust, anxiously watch as their livelihoods hang in the balance. The story is the same in countless other towns and cities across the United States that have long relied on the steady influx of Canadian tourism dollars. The numbers paint a stark picture of the boycott's impact. Hotel bookings in Maine, particularly in areas heavily frequented by Canadians, have plummeted by over 90% compared to previous years. Border crossings have witnessed a dramatic decline, with traffic down by a staggering 32% in March alone. The financial losses are substantial. Maine, for example, stands to lose an estimated $1.2 billion in revenue, a devastating blow to its economy. Nationwide, the United States travel industry is bracing for a potential $3.4 billion hit due to the sharp decline in Canadian tourists. These figures represent more than just lost profits. They translate into job losses, business closures, and a ripple effect that will be felt throughout the American economy. The Canadian boycott is about more than just cancelled vacations or missed shopping sprees. It represents, honestly, a powerful new trend in international relations, the use of tourism as a political weapon. Canadians are leveraging their collective spending power to send a clear message to the U.S. government. Their policies have consequences. This boycott is a testament to the deep sense of patriotism and national pride felt by Canadians. They are refusing to passively accept policies they deem unfair and disrespectful. Instead, they're taking a stand, making their voices heard through their wallets. This act of economic resistance is, well, a wake-up call, not just for the U.S., but for the world. It highlights the power of tourism as a tool for political expression and a potential lever in international disputes. The impact of the Canadian boycott extends far beyond the tourism industry. Retailers, particularly those in border towns accustomed to a steady stream of Canadian shoppers, are experiencing a significant drop in sales. The transportation sector, from airlines to bus companies, is grappling with reduced demand and cancelled routes. The economic pain is being felt across multiple sectors, leading to job losses and a sense of uncertainty about the future. The once thriving economic partnership between the United States and Canada, built on decades of close ties and mutual benefit, is showing signs of strain. The boycott serves as a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of the global economy and the potential for political disputes to have far-reaching economic consequences. To truly comprehend the depth of the Canadian boycott, one must look beyond the economic figures and delve into the hearts and minds of Canadians. This is not simply a matter of dollars and cents. It's about national pride, dignity, and standing up for what is right. Canadians, long known for their politeness and amicable nature, have reached a breaking point. The rhetoric emanating from the White House, coupled with what they perceive as unfair trade practices, has struck a nerve. Canadians are choosing to spend their vacation dollars elsewhere, opting for destinations where they feel welcome and respected. This is a powerful statement, a testament to the deep sense of national identity and the belief that their values and their economy are worth fighting for. The Canadian boycott has cast a long shadow over the United States-Canada relationship. The once easy flow of goods and people across the world's longest undefended border has been disrupted, replaced by a growing sense of mistrust and resentment. Repairing this rift will require more than just economic concessions. It demands a fundamental shift in attitude and approach. The United States must acknowledge the legitimacy of Canadian concerns and engage in a meaningful dialogue based on mutual respect and understanding. Tariffs, imposed without due consideration for their impact on the Canadian economy, need to be revisited. The rhetoric emanating from the White House, dismissive of Canadian concerns and sovereignty, must be replaced by a tone of cooperation and partnership. The path forward requires a commitment to rebuilding trust, a recognition that the well-being of both nations is inextricably linked. The Canadian boycott serves as a stark warning, a harbinger of a future where tourism becomes increasingly intertwined with geopolitics. As global tensions rise and nations grapple with complex political and economic issues, tourism may increasingly be wielded as a tool of influence and protest. The world is watching, taking note of the Canadian example. Will other nations facing similar challenges in their relationships with the United States or other global powers follow Canada's lead? Will tourism become a casualty of political disputes, a bargaining chip in a high-stakes game of international relations? The answers to these questions remain uncertain. However, one thing is clear. The Canadian boycott has irrevocably changed the landscape of international tourism, ushering in an era where vacation choices are no longer just about relaxation and adventure, but also about taking a stand and making a statement.